true value, the way I define it, is that it's not just the value that you're providing, but it's what is your superpower? What makes you unique? What makes you different than every other advisor around you? And then the second part is really being able to ask curious questions and learn more about your prospects, so then you can tailor what you're saying about your services. I mean, you want to be authentic and truthful, but to be able to say it in a way that really resonates with them.
Welcome to Knowing Me, Knowing You, the podcast for the future of wealth management. Thanks for being here. I'm Marla Sofer. Money is a tool. It empowers people. Let's dive into how technology is personalizing advice, strengthening connections, and creating lasting impact. If you're an advisor looking to differentiate, a fintech leader shaping the next wave, or a client ready to take control of your financial future, you're in the right place. Let's get started. Hi, and welcome to Knowing Me, Knowing You. Today, we are speaking with Kathleen Kingsbury, money mindset expert, wealth psychology coach, and fierce advocate for women in financial services. With over 18 years of experience training advisors on how to navigate difficult money conversations, communicate value with confidence, and close sales without apology, Kathleen knows exactly what it takes to build a business that aligns with your voice and your vision. She's the founder of KBK Wealth Connection, author of 5 books, including Breaking Money Silence, and a nationally recognized speaker whose work has been featured in the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, and Forbes. She also teaches strategic negotiations at Champlain College and holds a certificate from Harvard Law School's program on negotiation. Beyond all the accolades, Kathleen has lived the very mindset shifts she now teaches, overcoming fear and self-doubt to claim her space and helping others do the same. If you've ever felt pigeonholed as a female advisor or a client, I guess, and struggled to communicate your worth, or wondered how top producers stay grounded while scaling up, this episode is for you. Welcome, Kathleen, to the Knowing Me, Knowing You podcast.
Thank you, Marla. I'm excited to have this conversation today.
We're thrilled that you gave me a little bit of your time. We always start with, what is most exciting to you about the moment we're in right now, about the future of wealth?
I would say it's 2 things. The first is because I've been speaking on this topic of the great wealth transfer and the opportunity to better serve women for many years. It's very exciting that it's upon us and that it's 5 years or less away. So that is very exciting. And I think the second part that I'm thrilled about is the human side of finance is really gone mainstream. And when I started out, there was only a few of us doing it, and we'd always be like, there'd be one speaker per conference. And now people are talking about it. People like you are creating apps around it. It's just really exciting to see it come to Main Street, I guess is what I'd call it.
I love it. And I use the same words. I kind of say, it used to be the soft stuff. It used to be the touchy-feely side. Now it's your differentiation.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, and it's the soft side I've never liked because it's in a male-dominated industry. It doesn't feel like that's a compliment. And it really is the hard part. Not to say that the technical stuff isn't important, but it is the key differentiator. And it is often the thing that a lot of advisors struggle with.
Could not agree with you more on that one, Kathleen. 100%. I've now sacrificed my entire career in order to to surface this in a much more easy way and operationalize it for advisors. So we talk a lot about client discovery here on this podcast, and you have had a front row seat to what advisors themselves are struggling with. What do you think the most common roadblocks are that are holding them back?
That's a great question. I think one of the things that I find in the coaching work that I do with advisors is a lot of advisors who are very, very good have trouble clearly articulating their value to the client in the terms the client can hear or resonates with their life. I think that is a big roadblock, that it's really fun and exciting for me to work with someone around removing that roadblock. I think the other thing that I see is really being afraid to either ask to get paid what you're worth, or being fearful that somehow if you stick with your fee schedule or raise your fees, that clients aren't going to go along for the ride with you. So I would say those are the 2 big things that I see. And then certainly burnout in this field is kind of an ongoing issue of how do you manage your self-care along with really getting what you need to get done.
I love that you added it's articulating their value, but it's articulating value in a way that the client resonates with. It has to connect back with you are providing a service. And is your service a service valued by your customer that you are in conversation with that one individual at that one point of time? So I imagine that good producers know how to do that. They know how to context shift and speak with different clients on a different level, use the articulation, the language that connects best with their clients. How have you found that these top producers talk to themselves, get themselves like hyped up to create this great business and present their value differently?
Well, I think it has to do with one, true value. The way I define it is that it's not just the value that you're providing, but it's what is your superpower? What makes you unique? What makes you different than every other advisor around you? And then the second part is really being able to ask curious questions and learn more about your prospects. So then you can tailor what you're saying about your services. I mean, you want to be authentic and truthful, but to be able to say it in a way that really resonates with them. And typically what I see advisors doing is they talk a lot about deliverables, the financial plan or the portfolio and most clients don't live in that space. Where they live is I'm anxious about my financial future and I'd like to feel better, or I'm scared about market volatility and I need a guide to help me feel less overwhelmed by it. And so it's really top producers, I think, do a great job of not only understanding what their value is and their superpower, but also being able to tailor how they're talking about that with their clients to really help them understand, if you work with me, this is the emotional transformation that you will experience. Because people make buying decisions, and maybe I don't need to tell you this, but based on emotions, not on logic, not on deliverables.
Love it. The way I often talk about this and have seen it firsthand coming from the space of product manufacturing, at BlackRock, is we're told to sell. We're often not necessarily taught to solution. And it's a very different skill set. And I love the term emotional transformation. And when I hear you say it, it reflects to me, it's a transformation in your emotional relationship with money. So if you came in, you had a problem you needed me to help you with, and it has to do with that emotional relationship with money, fear, anxiety, overwhelm, insecurity, uncertainty, all of those things. And I'm helping you with that. Is that kind of how you're defining emotional transformation?
Yes, I can give you a concrete example. So suppose you have a woman who is a prospect who's going through a divorce, and she comes in and she is, for the first time in her life, thinking about managing money by herself, wants to figure out how to advocate for herself during this divorce, but is also, any divorce, even a good divorce, so to speak, is very emotional for people. And so really looking for someone who can help her become educated and also help her reduce her anxiety, reduce the uncertainty. And you could talk to her about a financial plan, but if you don't talk to her about a financial plan along with having a plan is going to help you feel more optimistic about your future. I understand it's different than what you thought, and that what we're going to do is really guide you through that process. So you make sure you won't make any mistakes or you won't have any gaps in what your financial planning is. And so it's really speaking to the fact that she's going from being uncertain and like, oh, wow, I've never done this before, to wait a second, now I have somebody who can help me do this, that's going to help me feel more confident and that I trust.
It is very much looking at you're coming here not just because you want an allocation of your investment.
Yes.
You're coming here because you want to be on a wellness journey. And I'm going to actually help you feel better. And we're going to dive into how you're using money and your relationship with money as a tool to, as you said, feel better.
Yeah, it's kind of like, this just popped into my head. I've never used this analogy before, but it's kind of like when you go to a physical trainer, they don't say, well, you'll have 6 visits and you'll use 3 weights and then you'll get a written plan. What they say is, I'm going to make you feel better. We're going to build up your muscles. By the time you end, you won't have that pain anymore. And it's like they paint a picture of where the end is. And granted, they're not necessarily salespeople, but it's kind of like we have to get better in this industry of really talking about what are people really wanting. And if you look at any sales across a bunch of different industries, people make 90% of their decisions are emotional. They're not logical. And so it's really tapping into that. And I think a top producer is able to do that in a way where they not only feel like they are comfortable in their own skin and they're feeling confident, they also are able to handle the pushback or the rejection that happens as part of any service business. Not everybody says yes.
Tell me about it. As a founder, I'm very deeply familiar. Let's talk a little bit about women advisors. It's been a passion of yours for a very long time. There is a sense, and as I speak with male advisors, there still is this kind of pigeonholing of women advisors working with divorcees, other niche groups. Is it a limiting belief? Is it something that society is kind of putting on them? Is it a reflection of how the industry is marketing to them? How do you help them break free of that and actually owning and recognizing their value goes beyond, or they can certainly help here and they can help here probably way better than anyone else. In fact, my last podcast or 2 podcasts ago was just about that with Tatiana Sunik. As an advisor who's been divorced, she focuses on divorcees and her entire premise is I've been there and I get you.
Well, and you're raising a really important point. So when I work with women advisors, one of the things that I think that happens in this industry, and it certainly happened to me as somebody who is coaching, consulting, and speaking in the industry, is the minute you mention a female client, all of a sudden, most of the industry goes, oh, well, women advisors should do that. And so in 2012, one of my first books in this industry came out called How to Give Financial Advice to Women. And in the introduction, I specifically talk about how the book is positioned for the male advisor. But when I started promoting that book, where did they want to put me? Women's conferences. And I was like, no. This message is for the 85% of this industry. And women can certainly come along for the ride, but it isn't necessarily for women. So I see the same thing happening to the women advisors that I work with. I think part of it does a disservice. I think the second part is really your niche, which I truly believe people should niche in order to be successful, should come from your passion. Like, what's your why for being an advisor? And how do you identify that why and then go after that particular type of client? Because I'm convinced that all of us are put here to serve a certain type of person or type of family or whatever it might be. And so I've actually had women advisors that I've coached come to me and go, is it okay that I don't want to serve women? And I'm like, yes, it is absolutely fine. My skill isn't just helping you better serve women, although I know how to do that. It's certainly how do you get out and be a thought leader? How do you prospect whoever you're passionate about serving? And in this case, the woman I'm thinking about really wanted to serve male entrepreneurs. She liked how they thought. Everything was quick. Wasn't a lot of hand holding like sometimes people will need to do with somebody who's gone through a difficult life transition like a widow. And so I think we need to think about women more broadly. And we also need to think about the problem of women clients not being served in this industry correctly in a much broader way. Isn't a women's problem for women to solve. It's an industry-wide problem that all of us need to figure out how to do a better job, especially with all the wealth that's coming in their hands. And if you haven't figured out how to do that in some way in your practice, you're probably setting yourself up to have a hard couple of years.
So certainly, I'm sure you've heard the term riches are in the niches. And I've interviewed multiple and spoken with several male advisors whose entire practice is women.
I think it's great.
The male advisors, they are drinking that Kool-Aid. They see it. They recognize it. They know this is critical to the future of their business. And they're doing, a lot of them have shared with me, they prefer working with women.
Well, and what's interesting is when I talk to the male advisors, and I do coach male advisors as well, one of the things I often hear from them, and they tend to gravitate to me because of my expertise in women and wealth and better serving women. But what they'll say to me is like, I didn't purposely pick this niche. It kind of picked me. And they will say, just like you said, like, I prefer working with women. They're more consultant friendly. They're more, all these things, which isn't true for every woman that's out there. In order for us to do a better job in this industry and to better serve all the people out there, we need to really think about how do we get out of these gender stereotypes that aren't serving us? And I think that's what you're talking about in terms of that limiting belief.
What if financial planning wasn't just about numbers, but about you, your values, your goals, your vision for the future. Nomi is transforming client discovery for wealth managers, going beyond assets and risk scores to uncover what truly matters. With behavioral insights and real-time data, Nomi helps advisors personalize advice, build deeper connections, and grow their businesses. Because the best financial decisions start with knowing you. Discover the future of client engagement at nomi.com. Entirely. I would love to learn a little bit more about your program, Unleash Your True Value, and how it helps advisors find their confidence, negotiation, getting their value that they truly are worth. What is the mindset shift that you think advisors need in order to embrace that confidence in getting what they're worth?
I think a lot of times the Unleash Your True Value program, it's good for two different types of advisors. One is emerging. So you've got your technical skills, you're off and running, but you really haven't tackled how you communicate your unique superpower, how you communicate your true value. It's also really good for advisors who have been in the field for a while that need a refresh. Like, I haven't looked at this part of their business in a while. And basically the program has 5 different pillars. So the first 3 are you need to adopt a success mindset. And, that's about learning from failure, being willing to face rejection, being emotional intelligent, setting goals. The second one is to identify what this superpower is. What's your why? Who do you really want to serve? And what do you have to offer that's different from the person sitting next to you that happens to be an advisor? The third is let's put that into both writing on your website as well as communicating it. How do you communicate your value clearly? And like we talked about a little bit earlier, how do you communicate it in a way in which your ideal client can hear it? And you can include that emotional piece. The last 2 pillars are really looking at, does your client engagement serve that client that you're going after? Does it clearly communicate your value? Because one thing that happens, right? Somebody hires you and it isn't that they have buyer's remorse, but you better wow them right away. You better make it an easy process to onboard them. And so that's what that step is. And the last one really is about negotiating your worth. And when I say negotiating, some people are like, well, advisors don't negotiate. And I was like, well, you can have a fee range and you can all of a sudden find yourself always automatically discounting that fee range. Or you can think about adding a new service and how do you negotiate that? Or even negotiating with your vendors. So that's what that final pillar deals with.
Fascinating. There's so much. I've got a lot of questions for you. That was kind of a full, go to market, end to end, like how you embed this philosophy into the way you're building your business. As you coach people, advisors, emerging, those that are looking to kind of get into the markets they want to penetrate, how do you guide them to appear? So there's a positioning component. Make sure that the website says what your target niche wants to see. And there's also there's EQ, there's engagement. There's also the social bias of women are perceived differently, and they are perceived often of being more aggressive when they are often less aggressive than their male counterparts are. And I wonder if you don't mind talking about that a bit. And you also, I'm curious if you've seen closing to be harder for women, that it is, everything's looking great. Everything was wonderful, but the close, it's still a challenge. And I don't know if that's something that you see as a trend.
I think it really depends on the individual advisor. But when I look over, like I have a group for women advisors that meets monthly, and I think about that group or women that I've coached either currently or in the past, a lot of times what ends up happening is because women have been socialized a certain way to be of service, to not appear greedy, to be a helper, that a lot of times, and there is this social bias or gender bias out there, a lot of times they will back away so much that they either won't ask for the sale in a timely manner, or they'll feel like, well, I'm not the person who should serve this person. Like their confidence is very quiet, because I have some advisors that I work with that you would never know this is happening internally. And so it's really working with what are their thoughts and feelings about money, about being paid money, about asking for money. I do a lot around their money personalities. And then within that personality, how do you push yourself in a positive way, to be able to really feel in your bones that you're worth whatever you're asking. And in terms of closing, what I find is when people start to shift their mindset around money and earning money, that they're able to close sooner. Now, there is that bias out there. So there may be somebody listening saying, well, there is that bias. Well, yes. And I don't like it. I'm a woman. I don't enjoy it, but it's out there. So some of the strategies we might have to employ are a little bit different. And what is so great about that is the advisors that I believe are most successful are relationship selling. And in general, women excel at that. So if you really focus on how do you shift it from sales to service, how do you shift it from, I'm really serving someone, I'm not just doing a transaction, I find that that's where my women advisors really settle in and feel good about it. The last thing I'll say is I find there's also a group of women advisors that are so committed to role modeling, doing something different for the generation that's coming up behind them, that can be the catalyst before they do it for themselves, they do it for someone else.
That was fantastic. I would like to suggest all of our listeners to pause, rewind, and listen to the next 5 minutes again. That was the coaching that I needed to hear personally.
Oh, good.
It resonated very much with me as a founder and as that leading sales. It's important to hear those things. You've taught all kinds of advisors from CFP students to seasoned entrepreneurs. What is one practical communication tip that you wish everyone knew before they walked into a client meeting or pricing discussion?
I'm going to go with the pricing discussion. And I would love for everybody to know that you can say maybe. And so let me explain. I think there's a real power to maybe. Often when people are in a meeting and pricing comes up and maybe the prospect says, well, will you do it for less? Everybody feels rushed to have an answer. Now, typically, I don't think you need an answer. I think it's okay to say maybe. And I use this in my own practice. Like if I get invited to do a speaking engagement and, they don't have budget for me, I used to feel like I had to make a decision on the spot. Everyone will give you 24 hours. So it's, you know what? That's a really good offer. Let me think about it. And can I get back to you tomorrow? It allows you to space yourself away. You're less emotional. You calm yourself down. You have, you don't have to perseverate about it, but you can think about it and then decide, is this something that I want to say yes to? What I find is during that time away from the conversation, you can get creative. Maybe you want to say no and reiterate your value. Maybe you want to say yes, but offer them less deliverables. Maybe you want to ask for something else. Like in my case, if I'm going to take a smaller fee, then I'm going to want something else of value. So I really think the power of maybe, and don't feel so rushed to just tie it up in a bow. I understand why. I'm a check it off the list kind of gal, but it's best to kind of sit sometimes with it before agreeing to do something, because then you'll end up less resentful and probably more profitable.
Entirely. They're all sales, all advice, all of these consultative, service-based businesses have to balance empathy and authority, and particularly maybe tricky or a little bit fighting some of those social biases for women. How do you guide them to balance empathy and authority maybe even when they are working with more emotional situations?
Well, I think when they're working with more emotional situations, I would say lean into the empathy. And this is for all advisors. I do think sometimes there's people who lean into the empathy. It could be a man, but it often is women, and they burn out because they just take too much on. But you can be empathetic and set appropriate boundaries. I get a sense, and this comes from all my work with clients, not necessarily advisors, that when somebody's in a difficult emotional place, they need to be heard, they need to be validated. And if you get really curious about what's going on with them, as opposed to trying to fix it, you can learn more. And at some point realize, okay, they either will tell you or you're like, this is what they need. And that's when you put on, I call it the expert hat, but the authority hat, and start giving the advice. But if you don't do the empathy and curiosity first, often you miss the boat.
And I would imagine also in pricing conversations, authority is the hat to wear.
Well, actually, I spend a lot of time coaching people to ask a lot of curious questions about if there is pushback about pricing, to really spend time understanding that pushback as opposed to this is my fee, and then having that authority. So I always think that people want to be heard. And if you can hear them and understand where they're coming from, then you're really ultimately, if you land a deal, and you're talking about pricing, you want it to work for the client. You also want it to work for you. And sometimes that means not working with somebody. And I think that's also a part I see a lot of advisors, especially as they're building their book of business. It's like sometimes you got to get to the no quicker and move on.
I love the point about people just want to feel heard and I would say known, which is generally what known is all about. So we like the idea of know me. We'd like advisors to know their clients in a better way, make them feel heard, be able to articulate in a way that resonates. We always end our podcast asking, what is one instance in your life or a conversation you've had that has changed your personal relationship with money?
I have many. So when I was starting out in the field and I was a keynote speaker, it was actually my first keynote in the financial services industry. And I can remember getting on stage, it was very stressful back then to get on a keynote stage, got on stage, did really well, got off stage and made a joke to the wholesalers who had brought me in. And my joke was, they said that was really good. And I go, well, that's why you pay me the big bucks. And they kind of giggled, but not necessarily with me. And I was like, wait a second. So I started to explore, and the gentleman after me, who was very good and had been at it longer than I realized he was getting paid 3 times what I was getting paid to be on the same stage. And in that moment, I thought 2 things. Something's wrong with this. And I have to do a better job of researching and advocating for my worth. And when I learned to do that, that's when I decided to bring the money psychology and the money message and the pricing strategies to other people, because I know how hard it can be. But boy, that was a wake-up call. I can still picture what I was wearing. I can still picture the moment, those wholesalers who were nice guys, but laughing about my price. And I thought, never going to undercharge by that much again.
What a great message to end on. Kathleen, thank you so much for showing us that confidence isn't something you have or don't. It's something you build. It is something you can learn how to exude. Your work helping advisors break silence, patterns, and break through ceilings that they didn't even know they were there, recognizing and tapping into their maximum value to deliver the best, highest value to each of their clients. Where can our listeners learn more about you and the type of work you do and the Unleash Your True Value program?
Sure. The best place to go is to my website, which is kbkwealthconnection.com. I offer private and group coaching for advisors. So if you're interested at all in just having a conversation, there's certainly a link to set up a free consultation, and I would love to hear from you.
And for the record, it was an advisor who is coached by Kathleen, I think, that referred me to you, that launched into this conversation, if I recall. For our listeners, what is the part of your value that you're still hiding? Do you feel like you can unleash more of your true value? And what would you change if you fully owned that value? If you appreciated this conversation, please put a note or a question in the comments, send a DM, like this episode, share this episode on either the social media that you found it or in Apple or Spotify. We appreciate every single time you do that. That is what keeps this podcast going. Kathleen, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for breaking money silence with me.
Thank you for joining us on the Knowing Me, Knowing You podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review. Your support helps us bring more transformative conversations to you. Until next time, keep discovering, keep growing, and remember, you're in control of your own financial story. Follow us for more conversations on financial confidence, self-discovery, and the future of money.